what would you say to somebody that is frustrated with where God has them, what they're having to go through?
Get on your knees and close your eyes and ask why. Why, God? Why am I going through what I'm going through? What do you want me to see? What do you want me to experience through this? What can I learn from this? Help me understand. Are you going to feel better in a week? No. Are you going to feel better in a month? No. A year? Maybe. 2 years? Maybe. 5 years? I don't know. But I know who does. And we never think like, what is this teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from this? Because we just immediately go to anger. That's like the first response. It's just to be angry and mad. And it's a universal emotion, but go to a more divine place for answers.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Leader's Cut. As you can see, we are not in our typical studio. We are with some friends today.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to get to meet a new friend of mine that I am a monster fan of now. She's going to walk us through her story. She is going to dominate this entire episode because she's a savage. And there's so much I want her to impart to you. So let's just pray and we'll jump right in and I'll introduce you to Natalie. God, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for this amazing savage of a woman. Lord, I thank you for how your hand is on her life. I thank you for the way that you are using her, growing her, preparing her for all that is ahead. Lord, I pray that you would minister to many people during our time, that you would encourage hurting hearts, that you would strengthen those who feel in a weakened state. Would you just do what you do? And would you use this conversation and use Natalie to do whatever you want to do during our time together? In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, Natalie, give us a little bit of your backstory.
Yes.
Take us all the way back to when you were a young girl, and then we'll kind of catch up to today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I am such a fan of you. I started following you about 1.5 years ago, and I just wildly resonated with your content and the production of your content, which is Shout Out Blake, which is helping so many people. So thank you so much for having me.
Sweet.
Jumping into my life, I grew up in Southern California, and I have been a surfer girl, an athlete girl, and was always really driven by sports. Always been really high achieving, really motivated.
What'd you play back in the day?
Back in the day, so I started my athletic career in softball. It was my first love. I started playing, I think I started playing at maybe 4.5, 5. And then I started playing competitively when I was 8. And then I also grew up doing things like junior lifeguards. So I was a really great swimmer. I loved dance, gymnastics. And then when I got to high school, I started playing volleyball. So
you did it all.
I was a busy gal. But, I think for my life, I had such an idea at a really young age what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think many of us can relate to the mental timeline that we all put on ourselves. Like by 18, I need to go to, a prestigious college. After college, I need to get a great job. After that, I need to get married. After that, I need to buy a house. The list goes on, right?
Yep.
We've all heard it. But I really thought that I had my life planned out for me. And I think everyone that listens to this podcast can agree that his plans are a lot greater than what we can envision for our lives. And so when I was 15 years old, I went skiing with my ex-boyfriend at the time. And I sustained a cervical spinal cord injury, and I had broken my C5, C6 vertebrae. And I always joke, we have to make a joke about it, right? Because that's how we get through life. But obviously wasn't good at skiing. So it wasn't like I wasn't a professional skier. And, that wasn't one of my sports that I had played. But I got injured in Big Bear, California, where the snow is a little bit icier than places like Park City and other places that I'd skied in the past. And when I had fallen, I fell at the very bottom of the mountain. And when I had fallen, I was face down in the snow. And I remember thinking, why can't I get up? And at that point in my life, I'd never broken a bone. So I got lucky and broke the mother of all bones, the spinal cord. And when I was face down in the snow, I thought to myself, I must have broken every single bone in my body. Why can't I feel anything? Why can't I move? And so I laid there for a couple of minutes And then the ambulance came over and the paramedics, and they got me onto like a little gurney stretcher. And as I was being transported into the ambulance, they had 2 young paramedics. They had to be, gosh, probably like my age now, like in their late 20s, early 30s. And one of them was pinching my toe. And I'm watching him pinch my toe. And he's like, I need you to tell me if you can feel this. And I'm like, I can't feel it. Very quickly, I can't feel it. And he's like, does it again on the other toe. He's like, how about this one? I said, I can't feel it. And at that time, I didn't know this, but that's how they determine whether you go to a general hospital or a trauma hospital. So at that time, they rushed me really quickly into the ambulance. And because I wasn't with any immediate family, I had to go by myself. 15. Mind you, I had never, let's take it back. I've never broken a bone. I've never gone anywhere really without my family. And so I'm sitting in this ambulance alone, and I'm just, again, thinking I had to have broken every bone in my body. And my first thought was like, my parents are going to kill me. I have a softball tournament next weekend. I'm just immediately thinking like, they're going to kill me. And so we're buzzing down the mountain, and it's quite a far drive to get down the mountain from Big Bear all the way down to where the freeway is, then to get to the hospital that I went to. And when I get to the bottom of the mountain, I remember like them just speeding to get to the very bottom. And I'm looking at this young man in the ambulance, and he looks real worried. And I don't think I'll ever forget his face. He looks real worried, but he's trying to console me. And at this point, I have a lot of pain in my upper neck, in my shoulder area. And I would later find that out to be neurological pain. And so I was in a lot of pain. I was really uncomfortable. And when we get to the bottom of the mountain, they then transport me in a helicopter, and they airlift me over to Loma Linda, which is a trauma hospital in Riverside, California. And when I get into the helicopter, and this is something that, obviously I had no idea what a spinal cord injury was. Obviously, I'm not oblivious. I've seen people in wheelchairs that have experienced, paraplegia, other things and whatnot. But that's not, still, like, getting into the helicopter, that's not what I thought was happening to me. And with a spinal cord injury comes, especially a cervical spinal cord injury, comes many different things. And one of them being, think of your spinal cord like your hard drive. So if you have like a crack on your screen, but the hard drive's broken, the computer ain't turning on, baby. It's not turning on. And for me, I had other bodily functions that were shutting down. So my one of my lungs was completely collapsed, and then my other lung was partially collapsed. And so I'm like choking, I was suffocating. And I have this spiritual encounter at this time. And during that moment, I am not sure what's happening to me. I'm thinking, well, this is how I'm going to die. I'm 15. I'm too young to die. I haven't even done enough things yet. I haven't lived. I'm only a sophomore in high school. And, at that time I'm thinking, still, my parents are going to be so mad at me. They're going to be so mad at me. They're going to be like, you like, how could this happen? XYZ. And then I just thought, I wish I could have been more nicer to them. I was just a young teenager and just and I'm like thinking during all this, and then all of a sudden everything goes white. Everything goes white. And I know a lot of people that talk about near-death experiences where they have this moment where they go above the situation, where they quite literally float above. They go out of their body and they float above, and like they're kind of like looking down. That did not happen to me. I still very much felt in my body, but I, at the same time, didn't feel in my body. And I'm sitting, and at that time, I'm like sitting. It's like I'm kind of just like a third party in my life. And I'm sitting there and I have no pain. I'm in this place where everything is like so white and pearly and beautiful. And I just feel like I feel like I'm like at home, and I'm like waiting to see my parents. And I'm thinking like, what is going on? What is happening to me? And That was only for about, I think, 19 seconds. Felt like an eternity, literally. And then the next moment, I'm being rushed into the hospital, and I wake up and my parents are there. And at this point, I have really bad like snow road rash. It kind of looks like road rash on my face and on my neck. And I just told them I'm sorry. And they take me into surgery. I had to have a 5.5 hour surgery. I think it was 5.5 hours, where they would fuse my C5, C6 vertebrae together. And I obviously don't remember any of that. And the next thing that I would remember is I would wake up and my parents were next to me, and they were kind of trying to describe what happened to me, what I was going through. And during that time, I was really just more focused on being able to breathe because, like I said, I had a collapsed lung, and then they were determining whether they were going to need to intubate me because of the other issue with the lung. And so I had to do these insane breathing treatments. And you think about it, if you have pneumonia, obviously you're not doing a lot of like laying flat, right? Because you need to be sitting upright. It's like if you have a really bad cold, right? You need to be sitting upright so the fluid can drain. I can't sit up at all. I'm laying flat with no feeling and no movement from the neck down. And I have to do these treatments where they're basically like sucking snot and fluid out of me and all like through my nose. And I also like don't have any ab strength or any movement to be able to like clench and like help this process. So it's like visceral to deal with. And so I was lucky that they didn't have to intubate me. But I would have to, after they decided they didn't have to do that, then it would be determined if I would have to have another surgery. So they're kind of in this limbo area where they're like, okay, we need to just see if it, held right. And if she needs to have another one, which is very common with cervical injuries. A lot of my quadriplegic friends also, we talk about that, whether they had to be intubated or whether they had to have another surgery. I was really lucky that I didn't have to have either. But a lot of really miraculous things happened to me when I was in ICU. And keep in mind, I was 15 at the time, just a couple days away from my 16th birthday.
Unreal.
Yeah. Pretty unimaginable, for sure.
You're thrown into the deep end of the pool, obviously, at 15 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, and now you're 30.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was half a lifetime ago for you.
Right.
And the last 15 years clearly have been filled with an insane amount of growth and probably an immeasurable amount of work. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about, so now that you transition into what life is going to be like now, mm-hmm. and you start going to work, you're still an unbelievably driven young woman, maybe even more so, but you're navigating all these new things. Mm-hmm. How did you go to work on building what now is your life, where it's not just about your injury? How did you go about building this new life?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think we would probably have to go back a little bit further. And so, after my time in ICU and inpatient and outpatient, I would be in the hospital for 3.5 months. And again, I'm a sophomore in high school. And so I was homeschooled for 1.5 years. During that time, I was going to physical therapy extensively. Still no feeling or movement from the neck down. I had to rely on my family to help me with everything from brushing my teeth, putting my hair in a ponytail, getting dressed, going to the bathroom. I mean, everything. I was basically a 15-year-old infant. Had to relearn everything again. And so during that time, obviously when you're in high school, you care deeply about what other people think about you. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I want to go back to school. I miss, being at school being around my friends. I miss learning. I miss having social connections, essentially with my peers. And so I decided to go back my senior year of high school. And I remember being in class and thinking like, I'm just such a fish out of water. I feel so ostracized and different from my peers. And there's nobody that can relate to what I'm going through. And I would even find later too that I didn't really have a lot of like quadriplegic female friends. I had some, but none that were exactly the same age as me, and all injuries are so different. So it was really hard to relate to people. Sure. So during that time, I really had to like, I don't know, just be my own kind of best friend and get to know myself and what I liked without anybody, which I feel like is something maybe a lot of people learn a lot later in life, because when you're young and you're in high school and you're going to college, you're, you know, really busy with social things and sports and school and, you know, everything that life throws at you. But for me, I had to learn basic life skills again. And I had to learn them without getting so frustrated with myself and my situation. And so I think for a long majority of my life, I really, I felt like a fish out of water. So that was the big one. And then we can talk about that as that kind of has spiraled into my career now. But I also felt so focused on achieving. I felt so focused on like, I need to walk again to prove all these doctors wrong that told me that I couldn't. And I need to do it to prove everybody else wrong. And so that was my sole focus, was like getting through school and my physical therapy and everything. And then I was able to take a couple steps to get my high school diploma, which was a really big achievement and I'm really proud of. But then that wasn't good enough. Well, then it was like, I need to do more, right? I need to be able to walk further, and I need to be able to stand for longer periods of time. And I need to be this example. I need to be this inspiration. I need to live up to all of it, right? Me. I have to do it all, and only I can do it. And with that, and when things don't really pan out that way, as you want them to, then you're like, well, what am I if I can't do this? Who am I if I can't do this? And it pillars into this like identity crisis, which, you know, you and I have talked about, of like, well, who am I if I can't play sports? Who am I if I don't walk? And Nick Buchoz, who is an inspirational speaker, he has no arms and no legs. And he said this in a beautiful Instagram post, and I have not stopped thinking about it since, but he said that, how can I be a miracle for other people if I don't get the miracle myself? And he talks about the miracle that happens in his soul and what happened to him. And the same thing happened for me, because I had to spend so much time with myself and get to know myself and spend time with the Lord. And I, slowly but surely, I started to feel just different inside. I started to feel less of a needing to achieve. I started to feel, I'm still very motivated, don't get me wrong, still am.
Clearly.
So I am, but I started to feel more worthy. I started to feel more confident. I started to feel like less of a burden. And that opened so many doors. And so I got into USC for college, and I studied public relations. And that was probably the first time in my life where I didn't feel like a fish out of water, because I was just like every other student. Nobody knew who I was before my injury. Nobody knew my family. Nobody knew me and what happened to me. I was just Natalie. I wasn't Natalie who had a catastrophic injury. And then I graduated college, and then I started working and, you know, being in my career. Then I started working for Dr. Eamon, and we're in our studio now with you. And again, it was like, oh, I'm just Natalie. I'm just Natalie with nothing, just Natalie, who's doing her job and coming to work every day and showing up and doing her best, right?
Yeah.
But during that time, I very much was like, well, I need to build all of these things for myself. Then I kind of got back into, you know, the achieving. I need to build all these things. I need to have a big career. I need to do X, Y, Z. And it got me laughing at one point, because I had a friend who I was working with, and he never asked me what happened to me. But then as we started to develop a friendship, he was like, if you don't mind me asking, like, you know, and then it got me thinking, like, nobody knows what my story has been, because I'm not sharing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I not sharing it? And then I was like, oh, I'm hiding. And And how many people listening to this can relate to that?
Yeah.
Like, I am hiding because I don't want to be in front of the camera. I don't want to tell my story. I don't want to relive that. I don't want to be my injury. I want to be more than this, whatever that looks like for people, right? And then it got me thinking, I'm like, oh, well, it's just easier if I'm on the opposite side of the camera in front of it. It's just easier if I don't. I'm more comfortable. And I think we all know what happens in your comfort zone. It's where your goals die.
It's great.
You know, it's true. It's like, it's where, oh, I'm just going to do it because it's comfortable. I'm going to stay with him because it's comfortable. I'm going to do this because I'm comfortable. And then what happens is that you start to detach from your true, authentic self. You get further and further away from it. And by getting further and further away with it, then you're like, oh gosh, like, who am I? Who am I? Do I even like this? Do I like this job? Do I like who I am? Why am I making this decision? And for me, I was like, I held on to this negative thought through an interaction that I had. And the interaction was, I had seen someone that I hadn't seen in quite some time. We went to high school together. And he made a comment to me. I'm trying to be nice about it. He made a comment where he basically was like, oh, you're still in the situation you're in, type of comment. And that hit a real deep, I don't know, negative thought about myself, wound in me that had not been poked in a really long time. And that stuck with me for a couple of years. And then I started realizing I was attaching to this word, and we call this word, it's very common in the disability community. It's called inspiration porn. And inspiration porn is where people that have disabilities or stories of overcoming, that they become this pillar of like hope and motivation and inspiration for other people. Kind of like a Disney story, right? Where you're like, you're kind of obsessed with their story and you're following them, and, you know, they become this like addiction. And I had never heard that term before. And then I heard it, and a lot of people are talking about it in the disability community, and I'm like, oh, I totally get that. And then I attached to that term, where I would turn down things because I was like, oh, like, what if people see me and they feel sorry for me? What if people see me and they're like, you know, oh, like, you poor thing, whatever. So I would turn down things all the time. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago where I was having lunch with a mentor, and she had asked me to do something with her. And I'm like, oh, and she was like, why? And I'm like, well, you know, I don't know. I just like, what are people going to think if I do that? She's like, what do you mean? What are people going to think? She goes, what do you think they're going to think? Tell me. And I'm like, well, what if they think I don't belong there? Or what if they think that, you know, they feel bad for me because of my situation? She's like, not one person that knows you feels bad for you. She's like, the only person I feel bad for right now is you, because your mindset and what you're attaching to that thought is so toxic.
So great.
And you need to hear it. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh gosh, like, that was not what I expected, right? I was like, oh, that's not what I expected from her. And then she's like, you know, I don't think you're giving people enough credit. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And she's like, well, there is not one person that we work with. There is not one person that knows you that feels bad for you. Not one person. And I remember thinking like, okay. So I left that lunch and I was like, okay, well, that didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. And I sat in my car and I'm like, okay, why do I feel like this? Why do I feel like people feel bad for me? Why am I hiding? And it just got me thinking. I'm like, oh, I care so deeply. I still care. It still matters to me. And I just, from that moment on, I was just like, I just prayed and I said, just Lord, just use me for why I had to go through what I went through, and show me. And I said that prayer every single day. Every single time I got in the car, I just said that prayer. And slowly but surely, new people would come into my life, new experiences, and I would just say, you know, I'm just going to do it. sure, I'll speak there. Sure, I'll attend this conference. Sure, I'll go to church with you. Sure, I'll do this. And so many different opportunities and friendships and other things happened because of that conversation and because of that realization within myself, and also because of my dedication and putting it back onto the Lord and just being like, Lord, I don't feel great, but I know and I feel deeply that I know that I'm set apart, but I'm still having a hard time with being set apart. And so going back to like the high school part about feeling like I wanted to be normal, that was a big part of my conversation with this mentor, was like, well, I just want to be normal. Like, I just want to go to work and I just want to be like everybody else. And she's like, you're not like everybody else. And she's like, you never have been. She's like, that's not, she's like, even before your injury, she's like, I didn't know you before your injury, but I know your family and I know that you're not. And I think deep down, I always knew that, but it always really scared me because I was like, I struggled for a long part of my life in wondering why I had to go through what I went through. And it would take me, and also like from that near-death experience and that spiritual experience that I had, I guess wondering why I had to be here. And it took me 10 years to even share that with anybody, because I just didn't know why I had to experience it. And then, and I think that's what happens on earth sometimes, is like we have all these experiences and they either bring us closer to the Lord or they make us resentful and they make us hateful. And then we become further away from who we are destined to be. And I think for myself, it has always been, it's always been me that I've had to literally sit with. And it's not even like even if I wanted to like be addicted to drugs and alcohol, I couldn't even open a bottle with my hand. I couldn't light a cigarette. I mean, there's so much of my life where, you know, being a quadriplegic, you have 4 limbs that are affected: your legs and your arms, and obviously your hands, because your hands are attached to your arms. But, you know, it completely turned my life upside down. And so having that conversation and being like, okay, well, I'm just going to put myself in a position where I'm just going to put myself out there.
Yeah.
And have these experiences and not, and live for an audience of one, truly.
Right.
You know, and live for an audience of one and be like, you know what, it's, if God has destined it to be for me, then it will be for me. And why am I fighting it so hard? And I think I fought it so hard for so long because I think like many people, we live for this world. We live for the achievement, the car, the raise, the marriage, the whatever. We live for this world. And as I was younger, even though I had faith since I was a little girl, I still very much lived for this world. I very much cared about all of the wrong things, people's opinions, all of it, and achieving. And it wasn't until I had that like cultural shift within myself where I was like, I just know who I am and I know whose I am, and it doesn't matter if you don't like me.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions that are burning in my brain. One, so you talk about, you know, everything we go through in life, it either brings us closer to the Lord or it causes us to resent him, be angry with him. And I've seen you talk about this online before, and it is pure savagery. But I get lit up in the DMs, in emails, people telling me about their situation, and then how frustrated they are with God, and some how they're so angry with God that they're actually in their mind entertaining walking away from God. Okay. This is clearly not where you live your life. So I want to know, and I want them to know, how have you do not seem ticked at God at all. So help me understand. You were a child, 15. I was a child at 15. How have you lived the last 15 years where it seems settled? Like it's settled in your heart? you don't wake up Sundays and you're like, you know what, I'm pissed at God. Now maybe, but help us. How did you get to that place?
I think because of my faith before my injury, it was always the foundation in my life. And sure, there was other things that got you distracted, right? Like we've talked about, but I've just always known the Lord. And I think after my injury, I just know that he doesn't make mistakes. And I've known that for a long time in my life. And I had always thought that if I was supposed to die, then I would have died. I would have died on that mountain and my story and my life would have been complete, but I didn't. And I always had this burning feeling in my stomach. Like, I just know that I need to share this. I know that I'm meant for more. I know that I'm set apart for a reason. And I think a lot of people feel like that. They feel that maybe burning desire that they are set apart, but they shy away from it. Like I did for a little bit, just because it was overwhelming in a lot of ways. And I also feel like a lot of people are lukewarm with their faith, where they're Christians on Sundays. And I think,
no one is safe around you. I just love you go at anything and everybody. I love it.
But I think
solely true.
But I think ultimately, I had extended family members that were really mad at God, very, very mad at God, because of what happened to me. How could something like this happen to her at such a young age? It's going to ruin her life. It's going to, she's going to become a shell of herself. She's never going to be able to get through it. Lie. And, we all know who lives on this earth. And that's what the enemy does. He spews lies. And what happens is like, we talked about this a little bit, but I think because of my faith before, that was because, to answer to your question, is that's the reason why I didn't get angry. Sure, did I have moments of frustration? Yeah. Well, I mean, I would be inhumane if I did not.
Sure.
But I think the hardest part probably with my faith is watching other people around me have a hard time with what happened to me, and being so mad and spiteful. And the way that I've lived my life, and I hope that if anybody gets anything from this episode together, is that I can't convince them that God is real, and I can't convince them of what I know and what I felt, but you just can't convince me otherwise. And with my, with that extended family that had a really hard time with it, I just have always led my life by example. I just have always been like, you don't have to listen. You don't have to listen to my Bible study. You don't have to, come to church with me, but you will see through me what he's done in my life. And if that's the way that we get to come to Christ together, then that's how we're going to do it. But I've never been an angry person. I've never been a resentful person, and I'm not going to start now. When I was 15, I wasn't going to start now. I wasn't going to let this ruin my life and take over my life. I was going to do something great with it. And I feel like I'm doing a little bit of that every day. I hope to.
So what do you say to people who get a little bit of a curveball in life? By comparison, nothing compared to the pitches you have hit out of the park over the last 15 years. But to them, it rocks their world, and they get upset with God. They blame God. What would you say to somebody who is navigating those waters and choosing, I want to be careful with this, to kind of play the victim a little bit? They may skew towards that. What would you say to somebody that is frustrated with where God has them, what they're having to go through? What does Natalie say to them? I
think as a friend, the advice that I would give them is get on your knees and close your eyes and ask why. Why, God? Why am I going through what I'm going through? What do you want me to see? What do you want me to experience through this? What can I learn from this? Help me understand. And as I shared earlier with the prayer that I mentioned to you, I said that every day for 6 years. 6 years, every day. Use me, God. Use me, God. Why am I going through this? What do you want me to learn from this? Use me. And are you going to feel better in a week? No. Are you going to feel better in a month? No. A year? Maybe. 2 years? Maybe. 5 years? I don't know. But I know who does. And we live on this earth for earthly things. And we get so caught up in all of the things, right? Making all of the money and owning the house and everything. And we think it's going to fill us up. We think it's going to fill us up. We think it's going to change us. We think it's going to make us happier. And then when it doesn't, or something horrible happens, like you're describing, we're just so mad and angry and resentful. And why? And we never think like, what is this teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from this? Right? Because we just immediately go to anger. Always. That's like the first response. It's just to be angry and mad. And it's a universal emotion. But I would encourage them to go to a more divine place for answers. And I think the savage in me would also tell them to stop asking your friends and your family for, what should I do with my life? How do I deal with this? How do I go through this? And then you get 500 different answers. And then 500 different answers, you don't feel any better after that. And then you feel almost judged because they're like, oh, they're judging me or this or that. And we're just quick for that immediate gratification of, I need someone's validation of this before going to God, before saying, help me understand why I have to go through this, and show me, put the people in my life, put me in positions, put me in places where I'm learning how to deal with this. He shows up for us, but we got to let him.
It's great.
Yeah.
One of the areas of pure savagery, in my opinion, where you own it is, and I especially think this is great for young people, young women, young men, and adults. When we spend a lot of time around adults who care very much about what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
I've come across a lot of people in my nearly 46 years on this earth. And this is one of the ways I described you to my wife. She might be one of the most settled humans I've ever been around in my entire life. You, even before I got to know you that well, you clearly, going back to 15, when you showed up to school and you were wrestling with those things now as a senior in high school, probably around 18, where you are now at 30, I want to know, how did you nip it in the bud? I've had to walk through this as a dad with my daughter, with my sons, really getting in control and on top of not turning the perception of man into an idol. Where it's all about, how do they see me? What do they say about me? You don't have an ounce of that in you. So
anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's not where you were. How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started filming, but there's this great quote, and I think about it often. In my mom and I, I'll get to the quote after the story, but my mom and I were out shopping, as we would do if I would have a hard day at physical therapy. We were like, oh, what do we got to do? Retail therapy. And we were in this elevator, and this older gentleman was in there, and I was having a bad day. I was having pain. I was having all these things. And this man, he had to be like maybe in the 70s, looks me up and down, and he's like, oh, what happened to you? Just was so much like, to me, it felt like judgment because I was, having a bad day. And I looked at him and I said, if I was going to talk about the worst day of my life, I sure as heck wouldn't talk about it with you. And my poor mom, she's sitting behind, and she's like, I roll out of that elevator and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. She's just having a day, right? But I wear all of my problems on the outside. I've been really blessed to not have struggled with a condition, a mental health condition. But many people do, and they get to hide them on the inside. And mine are on the outside. The first thing you see when you meet me is you see my chair. And I think for me, something I learned from my mom really early on is that people would stare at me all the time. If I'd go to the grocery store, if I'd go to, the mall, whatever. And they were really perplexed by me. It was like they were looking at me and trying to figure me out. And for me, that kind of internally went to, oh, they feel bad for me. They're looking at me because they feel bad for me. And my mom would always tell me, no, honey, they don't feel bad for you. They're just really intrigued by you. They think you're beautiful. That's not what people think. And she would say that over and over. And it kind of got into my head where I think I just confused people because I don't look like somebody that's had this horrible thing happen to them. I just look a little different. And it helps me a lot And as I got older, I was like, oh, and I would go out with friends that had met me for the first time, or we were new friends, and we'd go out to places. And I had this one guy who I was dating at the time, and it was like our second date. And he was like, do you just notice people just stare at you? Just stare at you. Like, and it was funny because I really don't really notice it much anymore. And it was funny to listen to him say it because he's like, you just have this thing about you. He's like, it's not the chair. He's like, it's just people just stare at you. And I'm like, I don't really notice it much anymore. And I think because of that long time of years and years where I had a model, right? I had my mom, someone tell me like, you're beautiful. It's not this, and then I started to develop that within myself where I'm like, well, maybe people are just a little interested in me and maybe I'm a little different, and that's okay if I'm different. And I'm not going to let it hold me back from places and things that I want to do because I have a lot that I want to do. And so I think for people that are struggling with that feeling of like, oh, like I feel different. I feel X, I would just lean into it. So when I started to do that, I started to have all these people come up to me and be like, hey, like, this is really interesting about you. Like, have you considered this? And all these doors started to open just for the sole reason of me being like, I deserve to be here. I feel good enough to be here. I know that I'm the only person in our company that has a disability. I know I'm the only person on a lot of red carpets with a disability. I know that I'm in rooms with a lot of important and powerful thought leaders and celebrities that have a disability. And I'm okay with being different. I'm okay with being set apart. And I hope that people that if they're listening to this and they have something about themselves that they don't like or they feel like holds them back, that instead of going away from it, they would go into it. And it's not going to feel great the first time. Do you think I felt great telling that guy off in the elevator?
Yeah.
Yeah, initially. Yeah, it felt real good. But later, did I feel good about it? No, it's not who I am. And it didn't feel great the first time I had to go back into my high school. And I had every single person in my high school, it felt like, looking at me and, that didn't feel good. But as I've gotten older, it's like, the more I've done things that have made me uncomfortable, the more I felt great about myself. And the more it's helped me grow and become the most confident and authentic version of myself. Because that's what injuries and hardships do to people. It takes you away from who you really are because you're knocked down. And we talked about this like with the post-traumatic growth on my channel a lot and with Dr. Amen, it's like, people that have something horrible happen to them, they experience one of two things. One being the post-traumatic stress disorder, which, I think a lot of people know what that looks like. And then the other one being post-traumatic growth. And it really just depends on where you're at in your life to determine if you're going to experience one or the other. And with post-traumatic growth, it really is a new sense of enlightenment in your life, whether that's spiritual growth, emotional growth, whatever that looks like. And for me, I think it was both. I really, I found so much value in the word because I really thought, I'm like, I just don't know who I would be now if this had never happened to me. And people get perplexed when I say that. They're like, what do you mean? Like, if you could go back, would you have gone skiing that day and break your neck and go through what you went through? And I think some days, like if I'm being honest, physically, I would have loved to just skip skiing that day. Would love that. But emotionally and spiritually, I would have gone skiing every day. I would have done it 100 times over. Because I respect you. But if you walked away from this interview today and you're like, oh, I don't know about her. I don't know if I like her. Your opinion of me has nothing to do with me, because I know who I am and I don't need you to like me because I like me. And we talked about this a little bit before the interview too. It's like, but we're not taught that.
Right.
And you're talking about your daughter, and we're not taught, like I said, I grew up in a really incredible household with parents that, gave us everything and treated us amazing. And I didn't grow up in an abusive household like so many people. And I feel very privileged because of that. But we're not taught in school, especially as young women. So take being a female and then plus being disabled. It's like you've already knocked me down 2 notches. says the world, right? Let's be honest. And I think for myself, I'm like, I feel it's weird for somebody to say out loud, like, I feel good about myself, or I think I'm smart, or I think I'm pretty. Then you're like, oh, she's full of herself.
Right.
But if a man says it, oh, he's very confident.
Confidence.
He's self-assured.
Yeah, right.
if she's a leader, oh, she's bossy.
Right.
Oh, there's just something. Or how many times have we heard this? Oh, there's just something about her I just don't like. But if it's it's on the other foot, it's like, oh, he's driven, he's motivated,
we call
he's
him
successful,
a leader. Yeah.
he's a leader, right? And I think for myself, that being, and that kind of like takes us to my attitude, which we talked a little bit about, but that has been something in my life as in playing sports and being a leader on my team, and that I've taken into my injury and into my career, where I have this mindset where I don't know, it's always really propelled me. I've always been really driven and really positive. And that has taken me so far in my life, in that even if I physically don't have anything, take me back all the way till the hospital, right? Right when I first got injured, when I had no movement from the arms down, from the neck down. And like, I don't know, I still have my mindset. Like, I still have my head, I still have my brain, I still can choose how I decide to show up. Even if every day is a struggle. I still have that. So why would I give up that too, when I've already lost so much?
Sheesh.
And that is like every single day when I wake up. And David Goggins talked about this in an interview, because he has, he's a great speaker and, an incredible author, but he talks about how every single morning he wakes up and it's a struggle because he has ADHD and he feels brain foggy and he has low dopamine and he doesn't feel motivated to start the day. And how many people feel like that, right? I mean, everybody in this room can probably agree, like, don't really feel like going to my 9 to 5 today, right? But for me, it quite literally is a struggle every morning to get up. I have to maneuver my body in specific ways to just get out of bed into my chair. And then with that, I still need help to do personal things and other things, where so many people are so blessed to just put the clothes on, take a quick shower, and head out the door in 20 minutes. Sometimes it takes me an hour just to do that, like I just mentioned. And sure, could I wake up every day and be mad? Yeah. Could I wake up and live on disability for the rest of my life? Yeah. Do I? No. Is that who I am? Is that who I have always been? No. Would that make me feel fulfilled if I did that? No. But I think we just have, and David Goggins talks about this too, but it's like we have two voices in our head. And the first one is like, you suck. You suck. You are not good enough. You're never going to get to be this person. You're never going to do this. And just like the enemy, you suck. Mm-hmm. Right? And then there's the other voice where it's kind of like your true authentic self. I like to call it my God voice, where it's like, no, you don't suck. You're just used to the phrase you suck. And you just you've told yourself that for a long time. And so it's like a two-way street. And I feel like for a lot of people, we just live in the one way. We live in the you suck. And it's because we haven't challenged it enough. And I feel like for me, my body was already telling me that I suck, right? Because I was doing things over and over. And imagine taking a shower and looking at the water hitting your legs and not feeling it. I mean, like excuse my French, that is every day, where you're just watching something happen and you have no control over it. And for me, the only thing that I had control over every day was my mind and how I decided to show up. And I always joke that my attitude has gotten me further than any hard work, right? Because people always talk about hard work. Just work hard. You don't think every single person that has a spinal cord injury has worked hard? Has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of paying out of pocket for physical therapy that's not covered by our glorious insurance in the United States? You don't think they've worked hard? That's the wrong message, in my opinion. My opinion is that we are only in control of us and and, and our mindset and how we decide to show up. And if you don't want to be in control of that, it's like sometimes you wish you could just switch places with somebody for a day. And you're like, sit for a day and tape your hands together with duct tape and don't move your arms. You can't itch your face. You can't take a drink of water. Can't get in and out of a car. Can't drive. And then tell me that you're not willing to change your mindset. And it's hard because, like, I think for a lot of my friends, they know me really well. And I try not to hit them with an attitude all the time. But there is some times where I had a friend who was over and he was like, hey, I really just don't want to go for a run. And I'm like, uh-huh. And he goes, oh, I'm just tired and this and that. I'm like, uh-huh.
You don't see what's coming.
And I'm like, well, since you're so tired, maybe we can just put you in a chair, right? Like I just said, tape your hands together and plop you there for hours with no one around you, no one there to help, whatever. And you can tell me how tired you get. And I said, you know where you're going to be tired? Up in your head.
Yep.
And he's like, I didn't mean it like that. Nah, you know what I mean, whatever. But sometimes you got to give it to the people in your life in a kind motivational way. And I think for my journey, I've been really lucky to be surrounded by people that really push me. And I know we'll talk about, my time with Dr. Amen and our professional relationship and working together for 8 years. But we do that for each other in a lot of ways, where he has pushed me to go deeper in my inner psychiatry type journey, right? And I've pushed him to kind of go outside of psychiatry to be able to impact and help many people with the work that he's done, and have helped him develop digitally on social media and in PR and in his show, and in so many ways to be able to not just impact the scientific community, but also impact the world.
Right.
And so many people now are struggling with mental health issues. We're just in an epidemic for kids and young adults and, even older adults, really. And so it's been a privilege and an honor to be able to help him do that. And yeah.
I love that one of the things I've gotten out of our conversation today is when I've given up so much already, being clear on, well, then I'm not giving up this. Mm-hmm. That resolve to say, yeah, okay, some things, and I'm just thinking about all the people out there who are lamenting their situation, and this was taken from them. Maybe they lost a marriage they weren't expecting to lose, or a child, or a job, whatever it is. Okay, there's some things that I lost, but there are some things that I have that I don't have to give up.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying is you got to get clear on what you refuse to give up, that you don't want to lose, that no one can take away from you. It's like I just see the younger you going, why would I let these people take away what I think about me, feel about me, how I see me? Why would I let them steal that from me? Then you go to work building this. This is who I am. I'm proud of this woman. I'm proud of who I am, who I'm becoming, where I am with the Lord, how we're walking together, all of these things. And like creating this bubble where there's God, there's gratitude, there's growth and work, but there's also peace. That's one of the things that strikes me about you. And you like throttle back in this episode. You are like, you're not afraid to poke the bear in a good way. Like just, we all need it.
Yeah.
Like you did with your friend, where sometimes we get in the dark cloud and we just can't completely see our situation straight or the truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need just someone to just kind of get in our face and go, really?
Yeah. Well, in Mark 2, he talks about, in the Bible, he talks about, his friend praying for him and he became healed from being paralyzed. Your circle matters. And let's not lie about it. If I was surrounded by people my entire injury that were like, you're never going to do this, you're never going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And I believed all of the doctors that told me, like, you'll never have, she'll have to be taken care of for the rest of her life. She'll never work. She'll never be financially independent. She'll never have a relationship. She'll never get married. She'll never leave her family. She'll have to be taken care of, whatever. Where would that have gotten me? And you and I talked about a little bit on being kind to yourself. I think there's a two-way street with that. I'm speaking from personal experience, so let's give me a little grace here. But if I would have been kind to myself and just listened to all those doctors be like, oh, you just got to accept it. You got to just accept that you're going to be quadriplegic and all of these things. This is your new reality. If I would have just sat with that, I just wouldn't have been fulfilled. I wouldn't have been fulfilled. And I know I wouldn't be here talking to you today about my life if that would have been the case. I would have felt not good enough. I would have still hidden. I would have been on the opposite side of the camera. I would have lived in comfort and I'm comfortable land, stagnation land. But that's just not who I am. That's not who I am. And I'm not, and I decided back then, it's like, I'm not going to let this get the final say and the final strike, right? On who I want to be and who the Lord has destined me to be. I'm just not going to do it. And where was I going with this? The first thing I said, I'm like, totally, like, I had something so prominent that I was going to say, and like,
it happens to me all the time.
Oh my God.
It just makes me feel better that you're there because you're a third younger than I am.
Oh my God.
And you're like,
where did I go with
this
that?
is fantastic.
Oh my God.
It's a brain. It's just the human brain.
It is. Well, there's so much to say. There's so much to cover.
There is. But I love how you are unapologetically where you are.
Yeah.
You don't hide where you've been, but you don't fixate on where you've been.
Yeah.
And this is the people that God puts in our life who help us see him more clearly are a gift, who help us become more who he's created us to be are a gift. And one of the things that I think is awesome about you from 30, let's just say from 30 to 60, if I were a betting man, I would bet that over the next 30 years of your life, you are going to help an inordinate amount of people find God, find who they really are, no matter what's happened to them, no matter what someone's done to them, no matter what someone's stolen from them. You're going to help an insane amount of people navigate some difficult things, and not just what you've navigated. Hard, there's a variety of hard. There are lots of hard things that happen in life.
Yeah.
What you have done this last 15 years of your life, I would bet everything to my name that God has used the last 15 years of your life to take it out for a spin this next 30.
Thank you for saying that.
And to literally wreak havoc. You, the first time we talked, I said multiple times, talking about you walking into a room. And I remember it's the first time I've thought about, like, no. And here's what I realized. It's probably number 4, number 5 on my list of things that I think about you is that you're in a chair while I'm talking to you. Because there, and I told you this, you are altogether different than most, if not all, the people that I've met. And I'll look back on this. You will probably forget doing this and who I am and all that stuff, and it's great. But I bet 15 years from now, I'll look back on this and go, Lord, you let me see someone in process just before you brought them into an entirely new season of building your kingdom in a way that, for you, this little girl, when she was 8 years old, probably never dreamt God would use her to do. And so I just want you to know, as somebody that God has allowed to come into your life in this season and for us to meet. You are a gift. And Holly and I, we are going to be praying over you and with you. This ride you're about to go on is not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about your past.
Mm-hmm.
It is about God and his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a wrecking ball. And I will enjoy watching all the people you help and help grow. Because it isn't just about, what will be interesting for people to see, you're just a savage. That your story is what it, for many, will possibly help them become aware of you.
Mm-hmm.
But that may be book number one. After that, the measure of help and the measure of ponies that God has put under your hood, wisdom and strength, and just a will to war. This is going to be fun to watch. And
thank you for saying that. I'm just going to make the fake eyelashes fall off.
Well, I mean every word. I don't do hyperbole and flattery, but I can't tell you how special it was to just get to sit with you. When I told you, you're literally on my top 3 list of people to sit down with. Because
I feel the exact same way about you. I was so honored and just excited that y'all came all the way from Arizona to spend time with me and with Dr. Amen. And I feel like for the next 15 to 30 years of my life that, as we were talking about some of my family, and extended family and people around me being kind of angry about what God had done to me and all of that, I hope that my example of how I choose to live my life and who I choose to live it for, if it has the ability to impact one person, that is such a win. And I'm just so grateful that you have this platform, an amazing show that showcases so much knowledge and helpful information for people, and that I could be one gal on the show. I'm really blessed and grateful.
You're way past helping one person. So you are way past that. Well, I told you would love this woman. She's a savage. Make sure you hit her up. What's your Instagram handle?
It's just at Natalie and last name Buchoz, Buchoz.
All right. She's going to be doing tons of stuff in the days, months, years to come. Just keep an eye out on this one right here. Let me pray and we'll wrap up our time together. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to learn, to sit with one another, to hear your voice, to celebrate your faithfulness as we watch step by step through their story, which is nowhere near complete. And God, I pray for every person on the other side of that camera. Lord, may they be encouraged. May they see the light of God lighting up the room they're in. And if they're going through a dark season of frustration and disappointment and curveballs, God, I pray that what you used to speak through Natalie, God, I pray that you would encourage everybody who's under that dark cloud going through it right now. May right now, Lord, may they sense your presence and may they be overwhelmed by your peace. And God, we just all pray over Natalie. Lord, would you bless her? Would you protect her? And would you lead her and guide her in the days to come? And would you give her a measure of strength and anointing to build your kingdom in a way nobody in our lives is building your kingdom. Lord, take this girl all over the world and use her to do things no one is doing right now to build your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of The Leader's Cut. I pray you sense God speak directly to you through it. Before you leave, make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new episode is posted. And be sure to share your takeaways and favorite one-liners in the comments. And if you think it could help a friend or two, I'd love it if you would send them the link to share it with them. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.